Well, today we have on Mr. Trenton Miller. He's a financial advisor in Hillsville. Sir, how are you?
Doing good. Thank you guys so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. The honor is ours. We're very excited to have you on. Yeah. We always start the same way. Where did you grow up?
Well, that's a bit of an interesting question. So I was actually born in Canton, Ohio, but my parents moved down here to Hillsville when I was 4 years old. So I don't really remember Ohio that much. Yeah. I have been back to visit family that lives there from time to time since we've moved to here. But I would say, I've grown up in this area. I'm definitely a country boy at heart, and I call Hillsville home for sure.
So your parents are from Canton, Ohio?
Yes, they were from a small town close to Canton.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that's where they grew up.
And what did they do for work?
So my dad has his own business. He does roofing, and he's done roofing for, I guess, close to 30 years now. So he's done quite a few jobs in this area. And then I guess about 15 years ago, he also started doing some landscaping and lawn work. So kind of has two businesses there that he runs. He's worked for himself as long as I can remember. There was a few years before I was born that he worked for somebody else. But I guess that's kind of where my entrepreneurial mindset came from, was just seeing how he was able to live and, just wanting to be able to create my own schedule and that type of thing. And then my mom is his secretary, so does his books and things like that. But for the most part, she's a stay-at-home mom, takes care of things at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said that you were 4 years old when you moved down here?
Yes, that's correct.
What about this area drew your parents in?
I believe it was, partly just wanting to get away from a community that was growing rather rapidly. When I go back to that area now, it is a much bigger town, or almost city, if you will, than it was, when my dad was growing up there. He tells me stories about, there used to be a pond here where we'd go fishing, and now there's like a grocery store there, So I think it was, moving a little bit further south, getting into a more rural area, getting to a new community. And they wanted to, find a good opportunity, to have a place where they could raise their children in a good environment. And I think, that was definitely part of the drawing factor, was just, some of the things that were going on in the area there. They didn't really want to raise children around that.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I do. I'm the oldest of four, so I have three sisters.
Okay, wow. So exciting. Did you serve as a role model for them growing up, or did you kind of stay away due to the gender difference?
I hope I served as a role model. Hopefully I still am, right? But yeah, we obviously siblings have their, back and forth moments, but yeah, we got along good for the most part. Obviously, three of them, they were closer than I was with all of them. I guess me and my dad were more friends and did things together in that aspect. But yeah, I hope I was a role model for them.
Do you have a particular memory with them that you're especially fond of?
Or your family in general from that time period? Yeah,
we've actually got to take a lot of cool trips together. So I don't know if I can narrow it down to one. That's a really good question. I should think about that a little bit more. We did get to take a trip out west one year. Got to see some really cool things. Went out to the Grand Canyon, visited a few other national parks. So that was really awesome. And then, let's see, I believe it was this summer will be 2 summers ago. So summer of 22, we got to take a road trip all the way up the East Coast, all the way to Maine, and spent a couple days in New Hampshire. So we got to see a lot of cool things there, and just spending quality time together.
Of course.
Family's pretty important to me. So yeah, like any good memories that we make together are really special. And yeah, we have quite a few. Like I said, I don't know that I have like one specific memory that's really, like this is my favorite memory.
What's your earliest memory? If you can recollect on that.
Like just as a child, like anything?
Yeah, anything. Because you mentioned not really remembering a whole lot of Ohio, so.
Yeah. I do remember one time in Ohio where we lived in a little apartment that was through the woods and across the field from where my grandparents lived. And every now and again, my mom would, kind of let me go over there, the cross country way. And she would kind of stay there at the house. And like, you could see my grandparents' house through the woods. So like she could kind of stay there at the house and kind of see me going out through there. And then, my grandma could see me coming. So it wasn't like I was getting out of sight that much. Like they were watching out for me. But I do remember one time that I was walking out through there and I got into the edge of the field and it was a little bit wet and muddy and somehow my boot got stuck in the mud and like, you know how it is. Sometimes your boots get stuck and you just like pull your foot out of it. That happened. And then I was like stocking footed in the mud. And anyway, I don't remember. Somebody had to come help me, my grandma or my mom, but I do faintly remember that. But that was
how that stuff happens, just little glimpses in time from that far back.
But yeah, so I probably would have been 2 or 3 years old at that point. I would say probably 3.
So when you got back here, did you start school immediately or did you wait a while?
Yeah, so I actually did kindergarten and first grade at home. So my mom taught me. And then for second grade, I started going to a private school. It was a pretty new private school here in Hillsville. And so I went there through 12th grade.
Okay. And what was that called?
It's called Island Creek Mennonite School.
Okay.
So.
Yep. All right, is it still open?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
all my sisters.
Is it out 100?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. All my sisters attended there as well.
And that's on Deer Ridge Road?
It is on Island Creek Drive.
Island Creek Drive. Okay.
Yeah, it's right across from Beaver Dam Road.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I know where that's at.
We've ran Beaver Dam a few times.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we're familiar with the area. Can you describe your day-to-day learning environment at Island Creek Mennonite?
Yeah, so it was mostly individualized. So we were able to work at our own pace a little bit. So I really enjoyed that. There was, certain classes that were taught and then it's like, all right, you know what you need to do, go do your lesson.
Right.
And then some subjects, it was just, you're more or less on your own. You read the text, answer the questions. If you have a question, there's like a supervisor there that can help you. So, that's the basics of it. I mean, we did PE and everything else that you do at every other school, I guess. So
we've actually interviewed a few people who had a similar education to yours, a private Christian school.
Sheriff Camp.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kevin Camp, he's one of the people. He talked about how rigorous the education was. He said that he was given a book like you, and he was told to read it and then do exercises, and that if he missed any of the exercises, he had to go back, reread it, and then do it again until he got it all right.
Yeah.
And he progressed up until he finished, I guess, in 12th
Yeah.
grade. Do you think your process was similar to that?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like if you failed something, you had to go back and
Right.
redo it. There wasn't any like slack given, like, oh, we'll kind of push you through. But yeah, I would say obviously there was a few teachers that I had that were a little bit more lenient. I would imagine that's how it is anywhere.
Yeah, sure.
But for the most part, yeah, they pushed you pretty hard, and you had to study and work for it.
Yeah, and you said it was a Mennonite school. Did you take courses in religion as well as more secular stuff?
Yeah, so we did have a Bible class that we would do, and that class was mostly taught together. So that wasn't as individualized as much. But yeah, it was just like basic Christian studies.
Yeah.
Was there a particular subject that you showed aptitude for at an early age, or you showed a fondness for?
So when I was a lot younger, like elementary school, I would say I was one of the smartest kids in my class. Don't know what's happened to that now, but no. I think my younger sisters stole that from me, but I definitely enjoyed math.
Yeah.
I did fairly well in math. And sometimes the teacher would let the other kids in my grade kind of like work in groups on things. Yeah. And we always enjoyed that. We had a good time with it. But yeah, I would definitely say math was my favorite subject. I mean, there's definitely times I was frustrated at it.
Sure, yeah.
And it was difficult. But yeah.
Were there any times where you considered being a financial advisor as a younger child due to your fondness for math, or did that interest develop later in life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't recall ever thinking about that process as much. And that's one thing, if I had to do over, I would do different is, start thinking about the future more. I feel like when I was in school, it was more like, you live day to day, when's the next holiday coming up?
Right.
And I wish I would have focused a little bit more on, hey, what do I want to do for a career? What kind of an impact do I want to have? But yeah, I don't recall ever, thinking like, hey, I should work in finance or I should be a financial advisor. And to be honest, I didn't really know what it meant to be a financial advisor at that age. It was kind of one of those things, kind of like, if you would have said the term CPA, I would have, I would be like, okay, what do they do?
What was your class size like?
They were mostly pretty small. Since it was a private school, it was pretty small. Most of my elementary, middle school, high school years, I would say there was 4 to 5 people in my grade on average.
Yeah. So. And did y'all close for snow like Carroll does, Carroll County?
We did some, but not as much. Obviously, we didn't have buses, so there wasn't that risk. So, if somebody in the family has a 4-wheel drive vehicle, most of the time you can make it to school even in the winter. So there were days that we got off because of snow or ice or something, but for the most part we kept going to school.
Did you ever go on any field trips?
Yeah, we went on I don't know how many a year, but for sure 2 to 3 field trips a year. Okay. One specific thing that we would do pretty much every year is go ice skating for a day. So we used to go down to the rink in Winston-Salem and ice skate down there. But in more recent years, they've started going to the Lancerlot complex up in Vinton, close to Roanoke, and ice skating up there.
So was that the stadium on Wake Forest University campus?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a cool one.
Because we've talked to a few private school and even homeschool people, and they said the field trips, there's much more opportunity to take field trips more specialized than what you're interested in. Yeah. Which is pretty interesting. You have on a Twin County volleyball T-shirt.
Yep.
Were you interested in sports growing up?
Yeah. I'm still big into sports.
Yeah.
Actually, that's what I've got going on this evening. I help coach for the Twin County Volleyball Club.
Yeah, I know a few kids on that team. So
Yeah. So I've loved volleyball for a little while. I guess I kind of started getting into it when I was about 18. When I was younger, basketball was my sport. That's all I played. I did play like a little bit of softball, like just church slow pitch softball. But yeah, basketball is my thing. I mean, through school, I'm like, I get a little break time. I'm out there shooting, dribbling around. But yeah, when I turned about 18, I started getting into volleyball a little bit, and yeah, I've really enjoyed that the last few years. I still love basketball. I would still probably say basketball is my favorite sport. Yeah. But yeah, basketball and volleyball I've definitely been into. When it comes to keeping up with sports, I like keeping up with baseball and anything. I just watched a hockey game on Saturday night for the first time up in Wytheville. That was really exciting.
So, that's actually become pretty popular, I think. Yeah, it's getting bigger and bigger, the one up in Wytheville. So
yeah,
it's good to see.
Yeah, I think this is their first year doing it, so I think they'll continue to gain quite a bit of traction.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And I've been to a few games down in Winston at the stadium you mentioned.
Okay.
And it's an amazing environment. It's crazy, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. After being at that game Saturday night, I was like, I've never played hockey, but I was like, if I would play hockey, I don't think I could play any other sport because every other sport would be so extremely slow. It would just be boring. Like, I mean, I've watched videos. I mean, I've watched hockey live a few times, like obviously not in person. But just being there and like, it is crazy how fast it is.
The skill too.
So,
navigating on skates.
Because you got to be able to, keep the puck where you want it on the end of your stick, and then also be able to ice skate extremely fast. Like, I guess you get to where you can skate without thinking about it. I'm not at that point, but
it's pretty physical too, because you'll see a lot of the players just bump against each other, and if you're not strong, and if you can't take that, you probably just break a bone or two from some of those impacts.
Yeah, there's definitely some hard hits.
Yeah. So you mentioned getting into volleyball at 18. How were you introduced to the sport?
Yeah, I was at I guess it was a volleyball tournament that I was at, and I saw a guy there that was playing. He was about 2 inches taller than me, I guess, and just an extremely good volleyball player, and made it look effortless. And I was like, I kind of watched him play. I mean, I had friends that had played before, but when I watched him play, I was like, man, that guy, he can jump really well. He makes it look so easy. Like, he's out there just having fun. Right, yeah. And I was like, I think I could do that if I would work on it a little bit. Yeah. And so I kind of started taking it a little more serious and practicing from time to time. And yeah, got to where I really enjoyed it. And I have, two of my sisters, all three of them have played a little bit, but for sure two of them really enjoy it. So we've been able to play together from time to time.
Do you prefer beach volleyball or gym volleyball? Is that how gym volleyball? I don't know.
Yeah.
But not beach volleyball.
Yeah. So like beach or indoor.
Indoor, okay.
So I don't really know exactly what to say to that. I enjoy both. Yeah. Indoor, you can jump a lot higher. Yeah, sure. So there is an advantage there. But any kind of outdoor volleyball, sometimes you'll see people play beach volleyball, which is like sand. Sometimes people just, set up a net in the grass and play. Outdoor volleyball is always a little bit slower. So, the game slows down, and it's a lot more about defense than it is about offense. Obviously, defense is the main factor, I guess, in any sport. But even more so, I would say, in outdoor. And a lot of times indoor, you're going to see 4 or 6 players on the court. Beach, you're going to see probably 2 or 4. Just because, where the game's a little bit slower, you can cover more area. And I think it makes you a lot better player, especially playing in the sand, because you're slower to move, so you've got to get to the right place. And you really, when you do touch the ball, you want it to be a really good touch, because you don't want to move more than you have to in the sand, because it wears you out a lot. Okay. But I enjoy both, different aspects of them.
When you started playing, did you know that you wanted to start coaching as well?
No, I can't say that I did. And the only reason I got into coaching was this past fall. Coach Edwards asked me to come help, just because she knew that I enjoyed the sport, and I do keep up with it quite a bit. But I don't think I knew enough about it right away to where I was like, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to go coach.
Would you ever move into the public school coaching for volleyball?
I'm not sure. I'm not completely opposed to it, but I got to be careful what I say in case Coach Edwards listens to this. She'll be like, "You said you would." So,
you get stuck with a job.
Yeah. So I'm not gonna say no, but for right now, my schedule is pretty busy. And so even, with the club volleyball, there has been quite a few times where I've been like, hey, I'm not going to be able to be there tonight. Or, a lot of times on the weekends they have tournaments. I'll say, hey, I'm not going to make it this weekend.
I guess with school ball, they travel.
Constantly.
Yeah.
So that would have to be, especially working full time, and it has to be a big strain on this.
Especially if you're not in the school system. So.
Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like coaching really caters to the teachers. It works into their schedule really well. My schedule in the evenings tends to be busy a lot of times, and weekends as well. So
I don't really know that many coaches within the county who aren't
Dale,
teachers.
He's a state trooper and coaches.
Okay,
but head coaches at least.
Yeah,
I don't really think there's many.
It must be hard.
Maybe soccer.
To kind of look back a little bit, mentioned that your class size were 4 or 5 students. Did you go up? I'm sure you had to get pretty close with those 4 or 5 people, because I guess you're going all the way through school with them.
Yeah.
Was that the case?
Yeah, I mean, we were definitely good friends. We would hang out a lot, sometimes after school, sometimes on the weekends. But you also often shared a classroom with a few other grades. So it definitely felt bigger than that a lot of times, especially with individualized learning. When you're just kind of in your office there working on your own, there could be 3 or 4 different grades in a room, especially if they're smaller grades. So yeah, we were definitely good friends, but yeah, I don't know. We were pretty close, I would say.
So your senior year, did you know what you wanted to do, or did you have any interest?
I had no idea. I had no idea. And like I said, I wish I would have, kind of thought about that a little bit more. And I feel like whenever you're looking to the next thing in life, it makes you enjoy life more. Yeah. Because it's a lot easier to stay positive. I'll give you a good example, just throw out the scenario of, say you're working in here in the office, and you're having a horrible day, right? But it's Friday and next week you're going on vacation, right? And it's like 3:30 and you get off at 5. It's like you're looking at the clock. I got an hour and a half and then we're done. Like it doesn't really matter how bad things go. You're like, hey, I just have to get to that point and then I am good to go. Right. So whenever you're looking forward to that next thing, it makes the burden in the moment feel a lot more bearable. And I definitely thought about it a lot, especially after I got out of school. I was like, well, I just started helping my dad a lot. Yeah. But I was just constantly thinking about, hey, is this actually what I want to do? Or do I want to do something different? And yeah, I think it would have been very helpful for me to start thinking about that early on. And that's why, I'm super proud of y'all for just kind of going out there and starting a podcast. I mean, you're still in school, but we're living in 2024. There are so many different business opportunities, dreams you can pursue at a very young age. I mean, you see things on TikTok, on YouTube, on social media where these young kids, 14, 15 years old are making quite a bit of money already off of some kind of little gig that they figured out. And I'm just like, wow, what was I doing at that age? So yeah, I'm super glad that you guys are going after this. And that was one reason I wanted to come on, was just to support y'all.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So you said that you were working for your dad. How long did you do that for?
Yeah, so right out of high school, I think it would have been a couple of years, probably 2 years full-time or so. And obviously, with my dad's occupation doing roofing and lawn work, it's mostly summer focused. Right, so there was times during the winter or slower months when I would pick up, a little work here and there, just working with other friends in the area, if they had something that I could help them with. But as far as actually working with my dad, I felt like I worked with him from the time I was like 13, 14 years old on up through high school. I mean, every summer I would work with him, full time, which was really good for me, just to start learning responsibility, learning, hey, real life is like, you make money, you got expenses, all these different things. So it was definitely a good experience for me. I didn't always like it, especially if your friends are just chilling through the summer. I'm like, hey, I want to go swimming today too, or whatever they're doing. But yeah, there was times when I had to go help dad work. And so that was a good experience for me.
We've talked to a lot of people about the value of jobs and athletics in teaching you hard work. Do you believe that that's true?
Yeah, I do think that's true. I think there is a real need for that in this day and age. And work ethic is something that, to a certain extent, it has to come from within, right? And I feel like a really good, on the sports side of things, coach, or on the work side of things, employer or boss, if you will, can kind of pull that out of somebody, kind of bring that want to the table. And that's one thing that I struggled with, when I thought about coaching. I'm a very driven guy. Like when I'm playing sports, I'm 100% or nothing. I want to win. I've jokingly said, like, hey, I'm just out here playing to have fun, but nobody has fun losing, right? Like, I'm sure you guys feel that when you're at a track meet. Like, you're going all out. Yeah. If you're done with that track meet and you still have energy left, you're like, oh, I should have gone harder. Like, you kind of relate to that. And I was just, thinking through that, like, I don't feel like I have enough experience coaching to where I can really pull out the best in somebody. Yeah. And I feel like there has to be a good balance of, encouragement along with maybe some harder coaching, correction there. And you have to really, how do I explain it? You have to let the players know that you believe in them, and you see that, hey, there is potential here that just needs to be released. So I don't feel like I've coached enough to be to the point where, hey, I meet you and, 2 months later, I'm pulling out the best in you. Yeah. But I think the best coaches, that's what they're able to do.
Yeah, that's well put, for sure. Do you think that there is a certain innate ability to coach that a person can possess, or do you think it grows with time, like you said?
Yeah, I think it would be some of both. There's definitely certain people that they can just kind of look at a situation and step back and process it and, really coach, well. But I do think, you constantly have to keep learning and growing. And, you look at some of the greatest coaches, they've coached for a long time.
Right, yeah.
And they may have moved around a little bit, may have switched schools, may have switched sports they're coaching.
Yeah, that's true.
But to some extent, coaching is coaching, right? And I definitely, see in my future, getting into more business coaching. That's definitely something I want to get into more. And so I think, there could be some correlation there between sports coaching and, business coaching.
Yeah, I can see how that analytical mindset is useful in both areas.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you worked with your dad for around 2 years, give or take. When did you start getting into this financial advising idea? This business? Was it directly after working with your dad, or did that come later?
No, so I mentioned earlier that I had worked in Floyd.
Right.
So, as I was working with my dad, like I said, it was something I was thinking about a lot and praying about, like, God, what do you want me to do in my future? And so there was, I guess it was one spring, I believe it was May, that one of my dad's friends from Floyd called him and it was kind of random one day and asked him if he knows of anybody that's looking for work. Yeah. They had a couple of positions open there in Floyd, and I think they were anticipating losing another guy that was like in a management position, and so they were definitely looking to bring somebody in that could work under him a little bit, that could potentially take his place in the future. And so Dad asked me, he's like, hey, do you know any of your buddies or anybody that's looking for work? And I was like, well, I mean, I'd be interested, if you don't care. And, Dad and I had talked about it, quite a bit. Yeah. Obviously working together, you talk about everything, right? Yeah. So yeah, we had talked about it, and he was like, yeah, sure, go check it out. If you think, it'd be something you want to do, he was fine with it. So I actually went out there to Floyd, and it was at a lumber mill. The name of the place was Long Island Lumber. Okay. And I talked with the general manager there at that location. They did have 3 locations at that point. So the general manager there, he showed me around, showed me the different openings they had. And long story short, I started working there the next day. So it was just one of those things that I was kind of looking for a job in my life that gave me some consistency, that, I mean, I wanted to work hard. Right. I wanted to do hard physical labor, and I did with my dad. But obviously it was a thing, like I mentioned, through the winter, there wasn't much you could do. Sure, yeah. And this would be, very consistent work. It's inside. And so, yeah, there's not really like, a rain day or a snow day, unless you couldn't get to work. So I was pretty excited about this. So I started working there in May of 2018. Okay. And I worked there for a little over 4 years. I worked there until July of 22. And this is quite a long story, so I'll try to just shorten it up where I can, keep it brief. No. So I really enjoyed the job. And I was working under the manager that was soon to be quitting. Or that's kind of what he was planning on doing anyways at that point. So when I started working there in May, he was hoping by like the end of the year, he could kind of be moving out. Yeah. So when they gave me the job position, they're like, hey, we want you to work directly under him. We want you to learn from him. He was an incredible guy for the job, that he was at, doing a great job managing people. He was like a department manager, did product control. So making sure, things are done right. And so I started working under him, and I remember, like the first couple days I was there, like the first thing he started teaching me is mindset, because mindset's everything, right? Yeah. And it was very hard physical work. I remember coming home in the evenings and like my body ached everywhere. Yeah. Like muscles were hurting that I didn't know I had, that, so to speak. But anyway, one of the first days I worked there, he told me, the quote from Henry Ford, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Right. Yeah. And I was like, man, nobody ever told me that before. Like, and now to me, it's a very common saying, I've heard it probably hundreds of times. But at that point in my life, it was very new to me. And I was like, wow, this guy is cool, you know? He thinks about things different. And there was actually a point in time when I started like writing down his different sayings that he had on my phone, and I just like made a note, you know, with his name on it, like here's all the sayings, you know, that he's taught me over time. So yeah, that was awesome. He taught me to work hard. He taught me to push myself. And we're still great friends to this day. He lives in Roanoke, and he's in real estate at this point. But yeah, I was just talking to him over the weekend. Super cool guy. I love hanging out with him. But anyway, his story was incredible too, and that was another thing that inspired me. So he's actually from Belize. That's where his family grew up, and he came over here when he was around 20 to 22. I'm not exactly sure what age, but he got married and came here to the States, and he's lived here ever since. And to him, coming over here to the States, he told me he came over here and started working, and I don't remember the exact first job that he had, but after he had been working there a little while, he found out of another job opportunity where he was going to be able to make $11 an hour. So this would have been probably, don't hold me to this, but I think about 8 to 10 years ago, probably 10 years ago. So 2014, 2013, somewhere around there. So $11 an hour wasn't, I mean, it was well over minimum wage at that point, but it wasn't just a ton, right? There was a lot of people making more than that. But to him, that was like the most he had ever been able to make in his life. And he was married. Him and his wife were renting a place, and he said they were able to save more money than like they had ever even dreamt of before. And so, yeah, he just kept telling me little details about his story from time to time. And I'm like, man, I grew up here in America, you know, and my family loves me, cares about me, you know, took me to church, taught me about God growing up, all these blessings that here I am, and I'm like having a bad day for the dumbest little reason, you know? And so he just really helped me see like, hey, there's opportunity everywhere. And if you will just, you know, be grateful for what you have and, you know, try to see the positive in everything, you know, there's rarely ever a situation where there's no positive out, you know, at some aspect. And so, yeah, that challenged me a lot. So we became really close friends over the years. And at the end of 2019, I believe it was the end of 2019, is when he quit working there. And so at that point, I had learned a lot, and I was actually able to take over his job as department manager there. So that was great. You know, I loved it. I loved the work. It was pretty repetitious and very physically taxing. It was definitely hard work. It was definitely the type of thing by Friday, you were ready for a break. And, you know, I love playing sports, like I mentioned. So I played volleyball, basketball on the weekends pretty often, sometimes during the week in the evenings, but mostly on the weekends. And so I did that for a while. You know, I was managing a few different people. I was, you know, product control manager, just, you know, really enjoying the job where I was at and felt like I was finding purpose there. And I really just tried to be the guy for, I tried to be that example for the other guys that came in there, just like, you know, the guy from Belize was for me. And I just tried to encourage them and, you know, push them to be more and to see the positive side of things. And obviously there was days it was hard. There was days I did not do good at it. But over time, the biggest thing to me was I just started to realize that there wasn't a career opportunity there because of the fact of the physical labor aspect. It got to the point where my back was hurting me all the time, my shoulders, my arms, my wrists. I may have arthritis right now. I don't know. I hope not. But there is times when it's just like, man, my wrist is, you know, feeling a little sore. But anyway, so I started to think about like, hey, you know, is there other opportunities in the company where I could move around? And like I mentioned, we had 3 locations, or the company had 3 locations. And I believe we had around 55 employees total between the 3 locations. So there was multiple different, you know, manager spots. There was sales positions. You know, there was like upper management positions, if you will.
Yeah.
So I talked with the owner one day, and just asked him, hey, is there going to be potential in the future that I can move up into a role that's a little bit, less taxing on my body?
Right. Yeah.
And his biggest question was like, well, why do you want to move? Like, you're doing a great job here.
Yeah.
I mean, I was making a great income. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I had a fairly flexible schedule. If I needed to take off and do something, I was able to for the most part. And it was just the kind of thing that it felt like he wasn't really, looking for like, oh yeah, we need to move you to this spot. It was kind of like I was fitting that role really well.
Yeah.
And so we did talk about a sales position for a little while, but he kind of had some other really good guys, in there in the sales, and obviously you don't want to take their job away.
Sure, yeah.
And so, yeah, we kind of talked it out, and, I was just very honest with him. I was like, hey, look, and we were good friends too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, he's about to fire me if I say the wrong thing, we were good friends. And, so yeah, I was just open with it. I was like, hey, honestly, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Yeah. Like, my body really hurts. And he's, he was very, very generous to me, and, tried to let me do a few other things, to give my body a break. But it really got to the point where, like, over the weekend, I couldn't recover. And I would come back in on Monday, my shoulders are still hurting. And I'm like, man, I'm the leader here, in this department. Right. And so as the leader, I need to lead, right? I need to set the example. If I want these guys to work hard, I need to be the one working hard, first of all. If I want them to have a good attitude, I need to be having a good attitude, first of all. And when you're in that situation where it's like your body's aching, you're trying to get a lot of work done, but it's just hard. Yeah. And it's hard to see the positive. Yeah. So anyway, after a while, I was like, hey, I really need to find something that I can do long term. Yeah. And it did look like I was going to need to move away from the company and pursue something else. So I started looking around at all kinds of different opportunities. I mean, I looked at different online, stores. I looked at e-commerce, drop shipping, affiliate marketing, ad marketing, all kinds of different things. Yeah. And the problem I kept running into was, okay, so if I use an online store, for example, if I start an online store and I get to a point where I don't know what the next step is, who am I going to ask?
Right.
You can look up a lot of things on YouTube, you can Google a lot of things, but I feel like at some point there's a certain spot where it's like, man, I just need somebody to talk to. Mm-hmm. Maybe you've had to call somebody about some issue. And you get a 1-800 number, you dial it, you're talking to an automated recording, and it's like, I just need to talk to somebody, like, just, and I felt like that's kind of how it was in business. I was like, man, I could, buy this course, I could put money into it, I could put time into it, but if I get stuck on something, who am I going to talk to? Yeah. And it was at that point in my life I started to see the value of mentorship, or having a coach, if you will. Yeah. And it was at that point that I realized that guy that I was working under when I first started working at the lumber company, he was a mentor to me. He really was. Yeah. I didn't ever realize that in the moment, I guess. I knew he was a great example. I knew he was having a good influence on me. But if you would ask me now, like, hey, who was one of your greatest mentors up to this point in your life? I would definitely say him. He's had a huge impact on my life. And so anyway, I started looking at all these things, and things weren't falling into place for any one of them. So I had a friend that lived in Christiansburg, and he worked in finance, and I didn't really know, what all it entailed. I didn't know, what his day-to-day activities looked like. I didn't know much about it at all. Yeah. But I did know that he ran his own business. He had, he made his own schedule. He had quite a bit of flexibility. He had a lot of potential with what he was doing there. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to talk to this guy and, kind of see if there's some ways we could work together, or, I didn't know. I was like, I'm going to just talk to him. What's the worst that could happen, right? So I went up to Christiansburg one evening after work and met with him at Panera Bread, and I distinctly remember this, so I'll try not to go into too much detail, but like, I could take you to the restaurant and show you the table we're sitting at, okay?
Conversation.
So we sat there and talked probably 2 or 2.5 hours,
Yeah.
like quite a while. And I'm just asking him questions. He's asking me questions. And the one question he asked me that I still think about is, hey, what do you really want from a career?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I mean, I just want something that I can do long term. I want to make a good income. I hadn't really thought about it in depth.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, like, I mean, like actually specific things that you really want from a career. Like if you could do anything you wanted to do, what are the specific things that would come from that career? Mm-hmm. And so I really dug into that, and I was like, hey, you know what? I want to be able to work with people, right? I'm an extrovert. I love talking to people, love meeting new people. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to work with people. I want to be able to have an impact in other people's lives. Yeah. I want to be able to have a team of people that I work with, right? Because working with 5 people on a project versus 2 people, normally makes it easier, especially if you're working together well. I wanted to, have a scalable income. Mm-hmm. So I wanted, to have a lot of potential. I didn't ever want to work in a business that was going to be capped. And that was one thing that I kind of felt there at the lumber mill was I was kind of capped. Like I had kind of got to a point where you're not really going to go much higher. This is kind of where you're at. So, you hear people when you're young, they're like, oh, you have so much potential. Mm. Well, at some point in your life, it starts to get frustrating because it's like, okay, when am I going to start unlocking that potential? When am I going to start reaching that potential? Yeah. Am I not going to reach it till I'm 50? Yeah. Like, can I reach it by 40? And I'm like, I want to reach it sooner rather than later, right? Mm-hmm. And I just, I want to be an example that people can look to me and be like, hey, this guy did it. I'm going to do it too. Yeah. So yeah, really, that was a big thing for me. I wanted to have, a lot of potential there. I wanted to be able to work from anywhere. So, I like to travel. I've been to 44 of the 50 states.
Wow.
Haven't been to a new state for like 2 years now, but that's because I only have a few more to go to.
So many.
Yeah. Jerry would probably laugh because he's been to all the states, like multiple times.
Yes, 6 times, and then he said.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's really cool. But yeah, so I'm like, hey, if I'm in another state and there's something I need to take care of, I don't want to have to come home quickly, and do that. I'd rather be able, and in the world that we live in, there's a lot of things you can do online. There's a lot of, you can make a phone call. You can do a lot, being in a way different location. So I was like, hey, that would be awesome. Obviously I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to be able to make my own schedule, kind of the same thing along with being able to work from anywhere, just have that flexibility. So those were a few of the things. And, another really big thing, and I kind of touched on this, was I wanted to do something that would actually make a difference in people's lives. Yeah. Like really have an impact. Yeah. Where I was working, I definitely felt like I had an impact on people's lives, but it was just kind of the people that worked with me, right? Yeah. So if you didn't come in there and work with me, I couldn't really have an influence on your life. Yeah. And I was like, hey, if I have my own business, I want to be able to have an influence on a lot of people's lives and really do something that makes a difference, and that provides value to them. And so I made a good list of, 6 things or so there that I really wanted. Yeah. My buddy from Christiansburg, we kept talking, and he's like, hey, I think you would really do well here. Yeah. And you could get licensed, you could keep working another job, and then, kind of start your field training process and kind of feel your way into it. And so that's pretty much what I did. So I quit working at the lumber mill in July of 22. And I didn't do anything as far as work goes for about a month and a half. I did quite a bit of traveling. I went to Alaska. I got to take the road trip up to Maine with my family that I mentioned earlier. Got to go down to Texas and hang out with a buddy down there.
That's cool.
So yeah, I took a few pretty cool trips there in the middle of the summer. And then I started working at a meat processing shop in Fort Chiswell. And during that time, so I actually had gotten my first license that I needed to start getting into finance in June. So the month before I quit working at the lumber mill. And then during that summer, while we're traveling, doing other things, I still studied, when I had time. So I finished getting licensed by like November, but I was committed to working where I was at until June, excuse me, of this past year. So June of this past year, June of 23 is when I quit working at the meat processing shop and went full-time into finance. So I've been doing that ever since. I did get one more license since then. I got a principal license so that I can train and promote other people that want to work in finance. And that kind of goes back to that goal that I was telling you about earlier. I want to be able to build a team. I want to help other people, chase their dreams. And yeah, for me, going back to the question that you asked, when I was in high school and I liked math, did I ever think about getting into finance?
Yeah.
The answer to that is no. And I feel like up to the point of me meeting with my buddy that worked in finance, I had never really seriously thought about it. Because, that's for people that are super smart, super talented, enjoy numbers, enjoy finance. But to me, that wasn't really the case. And now that I'm in the finance industry, I find that there's quite a few people that work in finance that have no history in accounting or finance or, maybe bookkeeping at all, never did secretary work or whatever it might be. But there's still, a huge opportunity. So anyway, that's the whole story. Like I said, it's quite long. But yeah, it was just kind of that process. And I feel like part of it was, that mindset that, my friend that I worked with there at the lumber mill initially, that he kind of instilled into me. Because I started really thinking through, hey, why do I do the things that I do in life, right? And that's a question we should all ask ourselves. If you're doing something and there's no purpose behind it whatsoever, then why are you doing it, right? We have one life. Well, actually, one of my favorite quotes is, every man has two lives, and the second life begins when he realizes he only has one. And I relate to that very strongly because I was definitely living one life until I realized, hey, you have one life. And then it feels like it's been a whole different life, the past few years. But yeah, so yeah, like I said, I love seeing you guys doing this here because you're taking it serious and doing something that you kind of have an interest in, and you're pursuing that. So,
you're coming up on 1 year working as a financial advisor. What lessons have you learned in this year about just being an advisor and about business in general? Because I'm sure there's a lot of learning curves and maybe failures along the way, I'm sure, in every business.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Another one that is difficult to answer because it's like, how do you narrow it down, right? So, anytime you start getting into something new, I mean, I'm sure you guys getting into the podcast, there's a lot of things you learned.
Just talking to people too.
Takes a little bit to kind of get used to that.
With the technology stuff, it was a mess the first 2 months.
Yeah.
It got better, but still.
Yep. And what they say is there's never a failure, right? There's either a win or there's a lesson. If you learn from your mistakes, you're fine. The only way you're going to fail is if you quit. That applies to business. That applies to a podcast. That applies to anything you want to do. So the biggest lesson, I'd have to probably think about that a little bit. But I think in business, your business is going to grow in direct relation to how much you as a person grow. If you don't continue learning and growing, how are you going to continue to get better at what you're doing and, growing and bringing other people up with you? I would say that's one of the biggest lessons. I'm a big believer in school. I think education is very important, but I think the things that we learn in school are, I don't know if I would ask you guys, hey, what's the most important things you learn in school? I don't know what you would say. For me, I think the most important things that you need to learn in school, I'm not saying I was the best example of this, but I think you need to learn how to learn.
Yes.
I think you need to learn how to respect authority. I think you need to learn social skills, how to get along with other people, even though they're not always the easiest to get along with, because that's real life. Yeah. And you're going to deal with that the rest of your life. You know, whether it's coworkers, whether it's family members, maybe, you know, you go to a church, that there's some people that are difficult to get along with, you know, maybe people in the community. You never know, but there's always, you know, just our personalities, our human nature. There's going to be times where we clash a little bit. Yeah. And so those are all foundational things that I think we need to learn in school. But I don't think learning should ever stop with school. And I've definitely learned way more the last 2-3 years of my life than I learned the previous however many before that. And that's a thing I continue to try to do. You know, I try to read good books. I try to, you know, listen to good podcasts like this one. And just put educational things into my mind. You know, I'm not really like big on the news. I'm not into politics, those types of things. But I do want to surround myself with people that are way further ahead of me in life, and learn from them. Because if there is any, you know, you see all these things, oh, this is a life hack, this is a life hack. If there was one life hack I had to give you, it would be find somebody that is ahead of you in life and either where you want to be at or on the path of going to where you want to be at. And then ask them, hey, if you had to tell me a couple of things that you wish you would have done differently when you were my age or when you were starting out, or, you know, maybe you want to ask it differently. Maybe you just want to ask, what's the best piece of advice you have for me? And most of the time I find that they'll gladly give it to you. Now, they don't most of the time just go around passing out that knowledge. But if you ask and they see that you're serious and you're sincere, they're going to be like, hey, I'm so glad you asked. Like this and this and this is what I would, you know, have done different. And so I feel like that's a real life hack because, you know, if I find somebody that's 10 years older than me and they've been on this journey, they've gone through a lot of things that I probably haven't faced yet. Yeah, that's true. And that can be for any journey, you know, whether it's, you know, spiritual, physical, emotional, if it's a business journey, whatever it is. I feel like that's a real life hack. And so that's where, you know, going back to having a mentor is really important to me.
Yeah, that was leading me to my next question. Do you believe that a mentor is really necessary to grow a business? Because Luke and I are kind of doing this on our own. We don't have a mentor, so to speak. So
and we have a few people that we've modeled off of. Not modeled, but I've taken inspiration from them.
But we don't have one-on-one contact with them. No. Kind of like you. Unlike you've had some direct contact with several mentors. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah. If you guys had to say, or if you had to name another podcast or maybe a couple of podcasts that you're like, that's who we would like to model after, do you have somebody in mind?
Lex Fridman podcast.
Okay.
Me and Ethan have both been big podcast fans for years.
Okay.
And we used to always talk about podcasts.
Yeah.
And we were sitting and said, why don't we just do our own?
Yeah.
So that's how that kind of started. But yeah, just especially talking about today's generations, they're exposed to so much. There's so much that other people couldn't view or didn't have the access to that kids today have. Yeah. So there is a much wider, a broader spectrum of what people can get into. Yeah. So that's pretty interesting to see. But yeah, we don't have really one-on-one contact with anybody that's doing the same thing.
We've had a lot of people, especially that we've interviewed, who have given us advice, and that's always very helpful, and we always cherish it. Yeah. But it's not a one-on-one mentorship relationship like you've described.
I think sometimes that's not really an issue either. No. For what we're doing. Yeah. It's not to kind of grow and develop at our own pace and our own direction. I think if you're doing something creative, that could be important too. Yeah. Not modeling off exactly how somebody else did it. But I think some things you need a set role model.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And like you said, I mean, you need to have your own personal brand. You know, that's what we call it in finance, right? Like you need to have something that kind of sets you apart, right? And, you know, you ask, do you think, you know, you really need to have a mentor? The first person that ever did it, they didn't have a mentor. And they somehow got to where they are today, right? The hardest thing is all the people that have these big podcasts that we know, you know, and listen to, we don't see the behind the scenes things, the years, the work they put in, the trials they went through, the learning curves. Like, we don't see all that stuff. We just see now, oh, they have an amazing podcast. They put an episode out every week. It's amazing. I wouldn't miss it. Yeah. That type of thing. But they had to start somewhere, you know, and you may have heard, you know, nobody, say in podcasts, for example, nobody that has a big podcast is ever going to criticize you for starting out, you know, starting small, for recording your first episode, you know. Not, they're not going to, because at some point they were there. In my business, I say, hey, no really wealthy person is ever gonna bash you for investing $50 or $100. Nobody that is ahead of you in life is ever gonna bash you because you're trying. It's only the people that are behind you, is what they say. And a lot of times it's just the jealousy thing, you know, like, I don't know if you guys have received any, you know, hate, so to speak, for the podcast, or people, you know, kind of talking down. But I feel like a lot of times as humans, you know, we let our human side come out, and there's jealousy and other things that come into play there. And in reality, especially in business, there's plenty of opportunity for everybody to win. You know, if you think back to the sports thing, bring sports and business together, there's enough rings for everybody, right? In sports, you win a ring. In business, there's enough rings for everybody. There doesn't have to be a competition. You know, we can all work together on things. We can learn from each other. So back to the original question, do you have to have a mentor? Absolutely not. You know, you can do it. Trial and error will get you there. But at the same time, I think it can be helpful, and it can definitely give you a boost in the right direction. And it can also possibly eliminate a few of those hardships.
Yeah, well, with us, I mean, the growth potential, where we're focusing on more local, is more local.
Yeah.
So we're even people in town and the county, and even some people from farther out too. But it is focused on more Appalachian, Carroll County. So we tend to pick up a lot of interest locally. Which has been great for us. I mean, it's opened up a lot of opportunities for us locally, and we've got to really know that our community too, which is important. Can you talk about the importance of community? Because you were talking a little bit earlier about how you decided to come back to Hillsville because it's small. Can you talk about that a little bit? Yeah,
for sure. I really appreciate you asking. I was kind of hoping you would ask this question. I love the community here in Hillsville, Carroll County. I love the genuine friendships that people have, just the way we acknowledge each other. You know, sometimes, you know, you're driving down a back road, you just wave at some random car, they wave back, right? I love that. You might be pumping gas, you might be in the grocery store, you say hi to somebody, they say hi back. I don't know how many times you guys have been to bigger cities or bigger towns where people aren't near as friendly. And it just always makes you a little bit homesick, right? Like, it's like, man, back home, you know, we're friends, you know, like, I might have never met you before, but we're friends. Like, we'll work together on something. And I definitely think community is important. I don't think God created us to go through life alone. I think friends are important. Relationships, very important. For me personally, you know, I want to stay in Hillsville for now because I feel like there's a huge opportunity here to make a difference. I feel like in finance, there's, you know, a lot of people that maybe drive a little ways, you know, to work. I'm sure you know of people that, you know, they drive to another county or something. I don't necessarily think that it is a like low class community, if you will. Like, I don't think people here just don't make much money. I don't really think that's the case. What I think is the case is people don't really have a specific plan for their money, what it should be doing for them. They mostly, you know, pay their bills, and then whatever's left at the end of the month, you know, we can go out to eat, we can do things fun, whatever that might be. And so it's really given me a desire to, hey, how can I make a difference, right? How can I help the community? If I can just help people put a plan together that says, hey, you know, let's put this money here, let's put this money here, you know, pay the bills with this much, have fun with this much. Well, yeah, it might not really make that big of a difference, like right now or in the next year or 2 years, but like 20, 30, 40 years from now, it could completely be a game changer. And it could start with just, small habits, just being disciplined in little areas.
Ethan, you're a big fan of Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
You're a big...
The 80% behavior, 20% math.
Yeah.
I think that whole thought process should garner a little bit more attention than it does. Don't get me wrong, he's a big brand. Dave Ramsey's huge, but a lot of people's like, oh, Dave Ramsey, they dismiss him. It's like, oh, credit card's bad, blah, blah, blah. They just, they hear the stereotypes and they dismiss him, but I think that what he says has a lot of merit.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there's a lot of things that he says that I would agree with.
Yeah. Of course, you have to take everything with a grain of salt, but
right. I've been asked the question, "How are you different from Dave Ramsey if you agree with a lot of the same things?" Okay. So to that question, my answer is, well, I like to customize it. If I'm meeting with you, Ethan, I'm going to customize something for you. If I'm meeting with you, Luke, I'm going to customize something for you, right? I'm not the Dave Ramsey that's talking to millions of people, where across the board, if you're talking to millions of people, probably the best thing to say is credit cards are bad because so many people have credit card debt. Right. To me, I have credit cards and I think they're great. They give me money back every year, right? Yeah. But there is certain people that don't have credit cards because they know that they can't control themselves. Right. And I think, that's great. And then there's other people that use them, but they use them responsibly, right? And they pay them off. And maybe they use that extra money that they get every year for something special. Yeah. I think that's awesome. Right. So that's the main way, that I would say I'm a little bit different because, the first thing I want to do if somebody wants to meet with me is I just want to have an initial meeting with them and say, hey, does it even make sense for us to work together? Because if not, maybe you're doing everything you need to be doing already and you just want a second opinion. Right. Or you just want to, confirm in your mind that things are working, how we should have them working, or things are set up how we should have them set up. Yeah. That's great. I'm not coming in here to say we got to do business, Yeah. I want to help people, like I said, as much as I can. But obviously, there's people that don't want help. There's people that just want to do things on their own. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah. But yeah, I think a lot of what Dave Ramsey says is good. And yeah, just the blanket behavior. Advice. Yeah, you stay disciplined in a few areas, and I mean, especially when you're young, it can make a hundreds of thousands of dollars difference down the road.
Right, of course. Yeah. So earlier you mentioned the licenses, and you have several of them. Can you give us a brief description of each license, what you had to do to obtain it, and then how it affects your day-to-day operation? Because that's something interesting to me. Just different licensures. Yeah,
for sure. So the first license that I took, I'm going to butcher the names if I try to go with like the specific names of the license. But basically the process for all of the licenses were the company that I signed on with kind of helped me through the licensing. Mm-hmm. So how it's set up is I'm an independent agent, but I'm licensed through a bigger firm. Okay. The name of that firm is PFS Investments. Okay. So I went through them to get licensed, and they basically would give me access to the study material. Mm-hmm. So I could either sign up and do like an online class, or I could just study at my own pace, which I studied at my own pace because like I told you, I was working a job. Right. So it worked great for me. I could study evenings, weekends. And then when I was ready to take the exam, I just went to a testing center. Mm-hmm. And I did go to Greensboro once, but most of the time I went up to Roanoke, to the Prometric testing center up there. So I would just schedule the exam, go up there and take it. It's registered with the state. Good to go if you passed it.
If you passed it.
So the first one was the Virginia Life and Health, I believe it's called. Basically, it gives you the power to help people with life insurance, with annuities. A few annuities, I should clarify. Those basic things. The next exam that I took was the SIE, which is the Securities Industry Essentials exam. It's just like a broad overview of investments. Securities is what they call it. And then the next exam I took was the Series 6, and then the Series 63. So the SIE, Series 6, and Series 63 gave me the license to start doing basic investments. So, I could help people invest into all kinds of annuities at that point. I could help people invest into mutual funds. After that, I got the Series 65 license, which makes you an official financial advisor, if you will, I guess. Yeah. You can actually call yourself a financial advisor at that point. It gives you a fiduciary license. You can, call yourself an investment advisor representative. It kind of gives you more terms there. But really a fiduciary license is what it is. So at that point, you can do managed accounts. You can do pretty much any investment, so to speak. And so that was the 5th exam, I believe, that I would have taken. And then the last one that I took was the Series 26, which is a principal license, which just gives you what you need, whatever you want to call it, gives you what you need to, train and promote other people.
Right, yeah. Are there any licenses you're looking to get in the future, or have you kind of gotten everything you need? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I haven't thought about it too much yet. There is potential that I would get more. Yeah. I think, for now I can build the business that I want to build with what I have. Right. I can build and lead a team. If I would get another license, it would probably be a mortgage license. And the only reason I would possibly think about doing that is interest rates on loans are really high right now. Right. And so, in 2-3 years, if those interest rates come down, I'm not saying they will, but if they do, a lot of people are going to be refinancing their homes. So I think it could be just helpful to people if I would have a mortgage license. Right, yeah. And the biggest reason would be, hey, if you're already working with me on your investments, your financial plan, your legal documents, and then we can just do your mortgage as well. That's just more things at one stop, so to speak. And the way I work is I try to be really personable with people, right? So, I want to give them my cell phone number. I want them to be able to text me, call me if they have, maybe it's a weekend and they have a question or they need help with something. I want them to be able to reach me. I don't want them to have to call a 1-800 number, talk to an automated robot like we mentioned, and just go through that frustration, right? So that's kind of how I work. And so I'm like, hey, if I have, more things to offer, I think people would appreciate that.
So you're licensed in Virginia only right now. How does that translate to North Carolina? Because I know we're really close to Mountain area or Surrey County.
I think in real estate there are reciprocal agreements. Do similar agreements exist for financial services?
Yeah, so different licenses are different. Okay. So the life insurance license that I have, it is state by state. So I'm currently licensed in Ohio, Indiana, Missouri, and Virginia. Wow. So it's kind of random, but I just had, different friends that either wanted me to help them in those states or people I reached out to. And it was just like, hey, you know what? It's not that hard to get the license. Think of it, once you have your initial exams done and you have your licenses in one state, think of it as kind of like getting a driver's license in another state, right? You don't have to retake the test. Okay. You basically fill out a form, pay the fee. Here's the license for the state. So it's fairly easy. So it's never been the thing of, oh, you're in a state where I'm not licensed, I can't help you. I was actually talking to a guy earlier today from Tennessee. And, there's definitely potential that we can work together. Now, the Series 65 license gives you a federal license. Okay. So you can work with anybody in the states on certain accounts. And most of the time, those accounts are going to be a little bit bigger, like over $25,000. But like I said, if I'm going to help somebody in that aspect, it might just be worth it for me to go ahead and help them, fully and just get my other licenses. Right. The other investment licenses, you select what state you want, pay the fee, and they give you the license. It's very, very straightforward. Yeah. So yeah, there's never been a time when I'm like, hey, you're in a state where I'm not licensed, I can't help you. I want to be able to help as many people as possible. Like I shared with you. So normally, let's say you live in what state? South Carolina. Sure. Yeah. I'm going to probably have a conversation with you and just make sure it makes sense to work together before I go ahead and get that license. But if I'm like, yeah, there's definitely, mutual interest there, there's things we could work together on, then yeah, there'd be times for sure where I'm like, yeah, I'll get the license.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's your general market? Is it more older people or younger or maybe middle-aged? Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I like working with people that are open-minded and want to learn, right?
Yeah, okay, sure.
As far as market, I want to set myself apart in that a little bit. I feel like the term financial advisor has gotten to be, I don't know what you guys think of when you think of a financial advisor, but I feel like that term has gotten to be a name where, oh, you have to have a lot of money, before you want to talk to these guys. Like you have to have $500,000 or $1 million before they'll talk to you. Because there are a lot of financial advisors that, their quota, there's one company I know of that if they don't open an account that has at least $250,000 in it, they don't get paid off of it. So why would they waste their time, right? Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to be able to help anybody anywhere. Right. We do debt stacking plans for people. We'll help people set up a budget. So there might be somebody that has a net worth of negative few $100,000, right, and what they really need is help putting a debt stacking plan together. Like, Dave Ramsey would call it debt snowballing, right? Yeah. It's kind of that same idea, right? Like, how can we take all these debts and just kind of create a simple plan with all of them that's going to get us to where we want to be as soon as possible. Yeah. So yeah, I really want to be able to meet people wherever they're at. Yeah. So, if somebody is a little bit older or however old you want to go, and they call me up and, want me to explain something to them or want to ask, for help on something, I'm going to do my very best to either help them or get them in contact with somebody that can help them. Yeah. I would say there's the most opportunity to help like middle age people, like, somebody that's married, maybe has 1, 2, 3 kids. I'd say there's the most potential to help those families. But no, I want to be able to help absolutely anybody. I've helped quite a few younger guys, like my age, y'all's age, just start something simple. And obviously moving forward, I really want to offer the business opportunity to anybody, that would possibly be interested. And that could very well be more younger people.
Of course, yeah. You speak about younger people. How does student loans factor into that?
Yeah. So are you talking about how do student loans factor into the debt as a whole, or?
Yeah, for younger people. Because I'm sure it has to seem like a big, great wide open when they get out of college.
Yeah.
All that debt.
Yeah. So, obviously, we've been going back and forth. Oh, you don't have to pay on your student loans. Now you do have to. Yeah. I think in June you're going to have to again. Anyway, obviously, I didn't go to college, so I don't have student loans. It can be very challenging, and that's one reason why I decided to get into business at a younger age. Because my point of view on it is college is a very good thing. I don't want to talk down on college at all. Yeah. But I feel like a lot of people go to college just to go to college. And I think there's a lot of times when, if you really know what you want to do, maybe you should just go for it right away. And for me, when I got out of high school, I thought about going to college, but the only reason I was thinking about it was because I wanted to play sports. And I was like, that's a bad reason to go to college, if you're never going to be able to go professional or whatever. I didn't want to go just to go, right? And also at that point in my life, I was kind of done with school. So I was like, hey, maybe in a few years I'll change my mind and I want to go. But obviously, God had different plans for me, and I never went. But I think it can be very good. If you have a specific thing that you want to study for, it can be a very good tool. But for me, if I think about going to college for 4 years, well, if I can work for 4 years in a business, you're going to learn a lot in 4 years. Yeah. You're going to work out, quite a few kinks. You're going to go through some hard stuff. But, think of, what you could potentially build in 4 years and just let your mind wander a little bit. Like, hey, there could be, I could be doing quite well 4 years from now. You never know. So, why not spend 4 years chasing something I'm passionate about, something that could potentially help me from then on instead of, and depending what business you get into, you might have some business debt. But if you're making a cash flow on it, it's not near as bad as a student loan, which student loans aren't too bad depending on what job you can get. But that was kind of my thought process. So going back to your question, student loans How do we deal with them? A lot of times, my questions are, hey, are you currently paying on them? Do you need to pay on them? Obviously, we want to pay off all debts completely. That's the end goal. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time. So sometimes that might be the last debt that we pay a lot of money towards. Obviously, if there's a minimum payment, you're making that.
Yeah.
But if you're able to do extra, if there's something that has a higher interest rate, you probably want to pay that off first. Now, the size of the student loan could definitely make a difference. Depending how many debts, like different debts you have, could make a difference. So that's where I would go back to, I said I like to customize things. I would really just want to have a conversation with that person and say, hey, do you have any other debts? Okay, what's the minimum payments? What's the interest? And then kind of put together a whole plan and say, hey, how can we get all of this knocked out the most efficient way possible?
Do you have any specific advice for younger people interested in building wealth throughout their lifetime but aren't really sure where to start? And I know there may be some red tape and you don't have to answer this, but just general advice if you are at liberty to speak about that.
Yeah. So I think you guys are doing a great job. Like you said, you like when people give you advice on the podcast. Obviously, that is not our first nature to want advice, right? We want to do things on our own. But I think, that's key to getting anywhere in life, whether that's, building wealth, whether that's starting a business, whether that's, whatever it might be, is getting advice from people that you know and trust. So, any younger person that wants to build wealth, get some advice. Get some advice from somebody that knows what they're talking about. Maybe that's somebody that's 5 years older than you. Maybe it's one of your parents. Maybe it's somebody that's, 50, 60 years old getting closer to retirement. A lot of times you're going to talk to those people that are, a little bit older, and they're going to say, I wish I would have done this when I was your age. Right. Well, that's very helpful because now I know what you would have done if you were starting over. Right. But if I had to just say one simple thing, it would be learn discipline. Yeah. Especially in finance, I don't think that young people these days are taught as much as they should be about finance. I think our school systems could do a better job of that. Yeah. I would love to be part of the solution to that in the future. Not exactly sure, how that would all work out yet at this point. But yeah, I mean, if you can even, start small with something, on the investment side, take reading a book. Yeah. Say you want to start reading a book a month. Well, normally if you aren't into reading at all, you're not just going to pick up the book and read it 1 month. Right. You're probably going to have to start small and be disciplined. Like, hey, I'm going to read 2 pages, today, or 1 page today, or, 5 pages this week, whatever that goal is that you feel is feasible, and break it down and then start to build from there. Yeah. I really enjoy working out and fitness and exercise. But for me, I wasn't able to just start going to the gym 5 days a week when I started. I kind of had to work into it slow. And so if you can just start to build those good habits when you're young, I mean, even say you start when you're 20 years old, by the time you're 30, you're going to have learned a lot. For one, you're going to be 10 years into it. So, you're going to have a way better outlook for what you need to do the next 20 or 30 years. But yeah, if you're working with somebody, that's kind of more or less on the trajectory that you want to head or in the place where you want to be already, I feel like, if they'll give you advice, that's a really good place to start.
And armed with all the knowledge that you have now, where do you hope to see yourself and your business in maybe 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so going back to the impact that I hope to make here in the community, I would like to, have impacted a lot of people's lives. I would definitely, like to be at a place where I do have a team, especially 10 years from now. Yeah. I would like to get an assistant or maybe 2 to do more like secretary type work. Yeah. in the future, because what I really like to do is meet with people. Right. I don't like so much doing the book work, the paperwork, the phone calls to companies. And, I try to make things as easy as possible for my clients. Mm-hmm. So if you have a question about something, I'm going to do everything I can to get to the bottom of that without having to bother you all the time. Because I know you have a busy schedule. Mm-hmm. So, maybe we're moving something around or starting something new or doing something. I'm going to try to bother you as little as possible. Obviously there's some things, signatures or whatever, that I'm really going to need to get from you. Right. But if I can, I'm going to try to get it done, and then be like, hey, I'll let you know, when we're good to go, or if there's anything else I need from you, I'll let you know. But I try to do as much of the back end work as possible. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like if I can just spend more time, meeting people, talking to people, doing meetings, and just have an assistant or a secretary doing more of that paperwork, I feel like I could be a lot more efficient. So that's kind of, where I would like to be. And I would also, there's a lot of people out there that are working in a job where they're just not happy. Yeah. Or maybe, they're like they love the job, but the potential just isn't there. Mm-hmm. I would love to, help a few of those people kind of explore other opportunities, whether it's in finance or something else. And just kind of, coach them, train them. I can give them some tips where I've gone through some hard things, like, hey, don't do this because I've done that and it's not fun. Yeah. That type of thing. So yeah, I would love to have a team that I'm working with, and just really, work towards making a difference in this community. I think this community is just the right size to where, when the word starts to get out about something, it can go fast, right? So if 20 people know about your podcast, overnight, 1,000 people can know about it, right? Yeah. So that, that's kind of what I want to do with my business as well. Just, it's going to be one person at a time for a little bit. Or I should say it has been. So, moving forward, it's like, hey, those people tell their friends that tell their friends. And if you're doing a really good job for people, that's going to spread. So yeah, that's kind of my goal, is to really, obviously I want to help people anywhere, like I said earlier, but especially here in Hillsville, I really want to be part of the positive change.
Where can people find you if they're interested in your services? Do you have Facebook, Instagram, maybe website, email address that they can, and I can put all this in the description for you.
Okay. Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking that. I am on Facebook. Okay. Well, that's where I contacted you, first of all. Yeah. I'm on Instagram as well. So most of my, public Facebook, Instagram, it's just personal stuff. Okay. I do have a private Facebook group where I do just share, financial tips, news snippets, just any different ways that I can provide value to people. Yeah. That's what I really want to do without them having, to be calling me or texting me. A lot of people are on social media every day anyways. And so if there can be a little bit of helpful information on there, I want to provide that for people. So I do have a private Facebook group. Mm-hmm. People are welcome to join if they want to, message me directly on Facebook. They can do that. I do have a website as well. So yeah, we can put that link in the description. People can contact me from there. They can access my calendar on there so that, they can schedule a time with me. Mm-hmm. But yeah, once we talk a little bit, like I said, I like to be personable with people. I like to give out my phone number. I want people to be able to reach out to me anytime.
Of course, yeah. And
as we're wrapping up here, I know you have to leave pretty soon. We have 2 more questions we always ask.
Okay.
Mine is, what advice do you have to young people just making their way in the world?
Yeah, so I feel like I kind of got into this earlier. I should have saved it. But just... start thinking about life seriously, right? Why do you do what you do? Yeah. And if there's no reason, then maybe you should consider doing something different. Mm-hmm. I try to think about everything in my life. Why am I doing it? If there is no good reason, then maybe I shouldn't do it anymore. Yeah. So, back to the thing I said of, hey, we only have one life. We need to make the most of it. I believe that God has placed all of us here for a reason, and he has a purpose for each one of us. Obviously, you hear stories of maybe younger people passing away tragically or different things. And to me, that's just like, you know what? It was their time to go. God had fulfilled his plan with them here. And obviously, he can see things we can't. And so there might have been a greater purpose that we might never see, this side of eternity. So really, take life seriously. And I feel like there is an issue with younger people, and I was definitely here. That's why I say it. I feel like there's a point in all of us younger ones' lives where we don't want to grow up too soon, because then life won't be fun anymore, if you will. But what I have found is when you get serious about your life and you have goals and dreams that you're pursuing and you're working towards that every day, life is more fun than it has ever been before. And that's from personal experience. I say that. Like I said, I was working at the lumber mill. I was kind of like, oh, I don't know what to do next. And I'm just kind of like going back and forth all the time. And not wanting to grow up because then life won't be fun. But now that I've kind of found purpose, found a direction I want to head, life's more fun than it's ever been. So that would be a big thing. And get advice from people that are ahead of you in life. There's no shame in that. I mean, we don't think our parents are that smart, but once we get a little bit older, we'll realize they were, right?
Yeah, right.
You may have heard the thing, the more you learn, the more you realize you didn't know, or something along that lines. And I think that's absolutely true. When I was, when I was younger, when I was starting out working at the lumber mill, I thought I had it together. I thought I knew a lot. And that's where, my good friend, if we talk now, he would say, yeah, man, you knew everything. We couldn't tell you anything back then. And I'm like, wow, because now, I know I have a ton to learn. That's no secret.
And our last question, it's a bit of a cliche, but we like to ask it of every interviewee because we believe it's very indicative of their character. And that is, what is the meaning of life to you?
The meaning of life to me is to know God and make him known. I believe that's the purpose of why I'm here. And I want, everything else that I do to kind of play back into that. Like I said, I believe everybody's here for a purpose. And yeah, the meaning of life to me is, we are so small in the big picture, in the overall, view of things. I often think of the thing of, if life was all about us, well, then God probably would created the world so that we could live on more than 30% of it, because the world's like 70% ocean, right? Am I close to that?
Yeah, something like that.
So, we can only live on 30% of the world, and life's all about us. Like, no, life's not about me. I'm here to serve others. I think, life's all about relationships. Our relationship with God, first of all, our relationship with family, friends, people we can learn from, people we can grow with, work with, whatever that looks like. But yeah, I guess that kind of sums it up there.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Miller, it's been an honor to speak with you today. Thank you for coming on.
We both really enjoyed it, and we're excited to have you on.
Absolutely. I greatly appreciate it, and appreciate you, Ethan, for inviting me to come on. I've greatly enjoyed, just getting to talk with y'all a little bit more, and it's definitely an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah. As a side note, Mr. Miller brought me some coat hangers for our radio, and I actually have the antenna in my room, and it works beautifully. So I'm really appreciative of him for that, and that's how we met.
Awesome. I'm glad I could help you out in that way. Like I said,
awesome.
Any way I can help somebody out, I want to be able to do that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.